Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about the DMR 3 class that I took over in Marietta, Ohio with Whiskey Hotel. Fantastic class. Definitely tests you, your marksmanship, your tactical side. It tests your grit because of the conditions and the cold. So I'm going to get into more of that on why it tests you the way that it does. But overall, it was a fantastic class right out the jump. All the people that attended the class were awesome. I got to meet Delta 34, so huge shout out to Delta 34. Awesome dude. But let's jump right into this. So, huge shout out to the guys, the cadre from Whiskey Hotel for helping me with filming some of this stuff because without them, I wouldn't have been able to film much of it. So, from the jump, got there at 7:45. By 8 o'clock, we were on the firing line, confirming zero and confirming dope out to 500. We did that from the prone, from a kneeling supported and kneeling unsupported. Bunch of different positional shooting, but we did confirm dope out to 500 in that fashion. Once we were done with that, we moved to the classroom, did a quick safety brief, and then went right into some discussions where we talked about target priority, camo priority, which ones work, which ones don't, which we end up doing a demonstration to showcase that. The use of scrim, how useful things like pipe cleaners are for attaching vegetation and pieces of scrim to you or to your weapon system to mask the outline. Talked about movements, masking your position once you've settled in. Did a cursory map reading segment where we just talked about how what like all the lines on a topographical map meant and how to read a topographical map, and how to use the key, the measurement key on the map to get line of sight distance. And then we moved outside for a demonstration and an exercise. First demonstration, or rather, the exercise was on the map reading, did a couple points on the map using the key to try to gauge distance. And then from there, we moved out onto the field where there was some IPSC targets that were covered with various camo patterns out at 200 yards, but just inside the wood line. And surprisingly, M81 Woodland actually did the worst. It was the one camo that we all picked up on first. My guess would have to be because of how distinct those patterns are and how harsh the color contrasts are. They just stick out. But I'll talk more about that at the end for my lessons learned. Once we were done with that, we all got back on the firing line and we began to work on a self-spotting drill, which was a 3-inch steel plate at 300 yards, getting into position, making sure that your position was right behind the rifle, and then if you had any adjustments that had to be made, the cadre would correct you so that you know how to get that perfect alignment with your spine to the parallel to the rifle. Then we would take a series of shots at 300 with the cadre spotting for us. And the point of this drill wasn't to make consistent hits at 300, but was to learn how to self-spot. Your ability to self-spot is pretty critical, especially at short distance ranges. Things like 200-300 yards. It's a little easier to do it at longer distances, but at short distances, because of how fast that bullet is traveling, it is pretty difficult to spot. So learning how to pick up on splash and trace if you can see it and make that correction. From there, we went on to do an off-axis spotting demonstration. So instead of being directly behind the shooter, being able to make wind calls or adjustments and relay that to the shooter, we were off 20, 30, 50 yards in either direction, left and right, And then we got to watch as the bullet was going down range, just past the target at 400 yards, and how to distinguish whether that was to the right or to the left following the trace. Essentially, if the target is cut off by the trace, the bullet passed in front of the target closest to you. If the target disrupts the trace, then it went behind the target away from you. And that's a pretty bare bones way to distinct which way that bullet had missed the target. But that angle will distort how far off you are. So it's really hard to read, and having that this demonstration really drove that point home, that it's extremely difficult and you got to know what you're doing to be able to relay to the shooter, because you're not always right in line or right next to the shooter. From there, we went to a react to contact modified drill. So broke up into teams of 4, did a react to contact drill where we would have to go through the 3Ds. I'll put those in the video so you can see what I'm talking about. And then once you start suppressing the incoming fire, you can coordinate movement to either get somebody up online with you to provide suppressive fire while teammates move, and then those teammates will flank and provide suppressive fire so that you could move into cover, and then from there you'd provide suppressive fire so that they can take that precision kill shot on the make-believe enemy. From there, we went on to do a capture the flag event, which broke up all the people into 2 groups, split the field in half, and we had 4 flags that had to be captured on each team. Had to capture our own flags that were like navy blue, but they were hidden within the wood lines. And while you were trying to capture your flag, you had to identify people trying to capture their flag on the other side of the field. Obviously moving in a means that would mask your location and your outline. So prior to doing this, we all went into the classroom. We were instructed to get rid of every bit of ammo on our body and to grab 1 empty mag, stick it in our pocket, and pull the bulk carry group out of the rifle and either toss it into the car or put it on to a table or a chair. As we left the classroom, there was 4 members of the cadre outside that door, and every one of them would check the rifle to make sure that there was no BCG in there. So your rifle was broken open in half, and you would confirm that with them, and they would also each confirm your magazine was empty before going on to conduct this exercise. Learned a lot on this exercise, and I will cover that at the lessons learned, but it was definitely interesting and brought a lot of issues to light for me. Moving on, we got back onto the firing line after a quick break, and then we started a target acquisition drill, engaging near and far enemies. I think there was like a couple targets, IPSC targets, set up at the 20-yard line, and then you had two rounds at that IPSC target, cam in your optic if you're running an LPVO or a magnified optic, engage a target at 400 yards, cam back out, and then 2 more rounds on target. The conditions made it extremely difficult to do that at 400 yards. You just couldn't see the target, so we transitioned to about 250 to 280 was the distance. Did the same drill, and that was a pretty cool drill. I did it both camming in for magnification and just running it at 1x using the LPVO. Once we completed that, we went on to do the last drill of the day, and that was a threat assessment and target priority drill. And essentially at distance, we had a series of cardboard IPSC targets that had different features to them. Some had a mortar tube, some had a silhouette of a machine gun, some had a radio, and you had to identify where these individuals were and prioritize level of threat before you can engage. So once you prioritize your level of threat for the individuals, there was half IPSC size targets, steel targets, off to the side, and you had to engage those targets to replicate a elimination on those targets. Awesome drill, was a lot of fun. But there was a lot of issues that I had throughout this class, not with the class itself, but more so with the gear and with the environmental. So I'll talk about that at the end when I cover my my lessons learned. So, rifle and gear. What did I run? So I ran this guy here. This is my LWRC M6IC-DI 16-inch variant. Up front, I have a AAC Ranger 5, Harris BRMS bipod, and then the optic is the PLXC 1-8 by 24 with the Griffin Mill reticle. And this thing performed beautifully, super accurate. I was running PMC X-Tac M193 loading. I think my estimated velocity was about 3,000 feet per second, and it lined up perfectly out to 500 yards, spot on. I run this call sheet wristband, and I'll usually take a laminated piece of paper, and I'll write in a quick dope, just doing half mil increments, so that I can get our target pretty quickly. But it held up perfectly. It was definitely overgassed, so I got a lot of once that all that wetness and got inside the receiver, I was breaking shots and I was just getting peppered with just wet carbon. So it's a little bit overgassed with this suppressor. Might be better off with a low back pressure suppressor or something like a flow through design, which I have one coming in, so I guess I'll figure that out later down the road. But ran great though, super carbon fouled up. That BCG is a carbon. It's a nickel boron BCG, and it looks like it's a nitride BCG right now. So I have to clean this pretty thoroughly. I mean, I can look at the rifle right now, and I can see all the runoffs from the carbon just oozing out of the receiver. It was pretty nasty conditions. Edgar Sherman sling. Love these slings. They're my favorite. This one's in Tropical Multicam, the Multicam Tropic. It's definitely wore. Probably time to upgrade it or renew it, but it's held up just fine. And yeah, glass was really good up until the environmental started to play a factor. And I learned some issues with suppressors in that regard. But again, we'll cover that in this portion coming up with lessons learned. So real quick, I don't have my my chest rig, but I was running a Warrior Assault Systems chest rig. It was the Pathfinder chest rig. Awesome gear. I've been running it for a couple years now. I was low crawling through a ton of snow and mud and dirt. Fell into a ravine. It just held up. I mean, the stuff that we were crawling through was real thick thorn vines, and it held up awesome. All right, just wanted to add this one thing in that I forgot to say during my rifle and gear overview. I did have a couple malfunctions, but they were magazine related, and it's this one. That's why it's marked with an X. I was having issues with failure to feed, and what I believe is the issue, there was a lot of carbon built up on the face, and prior to me cleaning this thing out, I was running that follower back and forth, and you could feel it hanging up. So what I did was I took a brush, I cleaned everything out with some brake clean and a brush, and then I sprayed it down with dry lube, graphite-based dry lube, and now it runs super smooth again. So I'm going to have to run this mag to confirm that that was the issue, but I just wanted to toss this in there to let you know that I was having issues. It was based on just that one magazine, and I think I have it figured out. So, lessons learned. So this is what I got from this class in terms of the most prominent lessons. First up is which camos were effective and which weren't as effective. Again, I covered the M81 not being it was the least effective of all the uh, the camo patterns that were used. There was M81, there was multicam, ACU, the digitals. I think there was a German one. There was a couple others. Surprisingly enough, the digital, the ACUs, actually it held up very well. Multicam was the big surprise for me. I thought multicam was going to be so-so, and it actually was towards the top of the list in terms of how well it worked to mask your figure and your position. That really, really performed well. One thing that I did is I was running some of my hunting gear, my Realtree stuff, and that Realtree was, dude, if they made a uniform and gear out of Realtree for use here in the Northeast and areas like this, you're damn near invisible in that field. It worked so well, and man, if shit hits the fan, I'd probably be running my my hunting gear as opposed to maybe my multicam. But either one works great. I just how well that Realtree camo worked was extremely surprising. Next up is the importance of scope caps. Now, I am not a huge fan of scope caps, but man, did I really need them. And I had a scope cap here on this optic, and it broke. But before it broke, it kept flipping open. And in that portion where we were doing the capture the flag, I was low crawling. As I was low crawling and doing what I was taught, you put the rifle over your arm, grab it by the sling, and you slow crawl or low crawl. And I was still packing that front lens with snow, which created two problems. One, trying to dig that snow out was a pain in the ass with gloves on. And then once that snow was out, all that moisture built up onto the lens and essentially made that optic not effective, which is going to jump into my next 2 points with the environmentals of the fog and the moisture on the lens. So with the fog rolling on in, and it was just such a high humidity, the lenses kept fogging up real bad, and I did nothing to mitigate any type of fogging on the lens, which is something that I should have did prior to, and I just didn't consider it. But now I'm going to have to consider it moving forward. So getting something like cat crap or some means to apply an anti-fog layer onto the lenses is pretty critical, especially for you know, working in environments like now where it's the middle of winter, it's snowing, it's wintry mix, which is what we experienced throughout the day. So, and then as that temperature starts to rise, you start to get a lot more fog. That humidity tends to pick up, and it just kept on fogging up the lenses, and that moisture would stick to the lens even though you would try to wipe it clean and puddle up right in the middle, and you just couldn't see anything out of the optic. So, picking up really good scope caps, utilizing them to cover the scope when you're moving in a manner that might get things onto the lens, and then prepping that lens for the event that you might encounter some fog or get any type of water or anything on the lens. Those two things are really important. I learned that the head is the most noticeable portion of the human body. Basically, every animal out there, the head is usually the first thing that sticks out. And the drill of doing the capture the flag, the head was the one thing that everybody kept getting caught on. They would just be able to distinguish the head. That spherical shape just sticks out amongst nature. So being able to use things like scrim or vegetation to mask your shape is pretty important. Suppressor usage. So using a suppressor on a 16-inch gun is fine, but I also found out that that additional weight out front will slow you down just enough that you notice it and it always lingers in the back of your mind. So for me, being that I had a suppressor, which this is a pretty lightweight suppressor to begin with, and it's a shorter configuration, just a little bit longer than a K-can, coupled with the bipod, that added quite a bit of weight out front, even though the overall package was still pretty light at about 10, 11 pounds for what it is. I can feel it, and I know that it played a factor in my ability to be faster. One of the other things was I was getting a lot of mirage off of this. So after you were using a couple, you were sending a couple rounds down range, that mirage would pick up so bad that you couldn't see what you were trying to hit. At one point during the react to contact drill, I was a point man, and I was initially engaging that doing that mad minute. And once I was done, I just did 10 rounds real fast, and then I slowed down my rate of fire to maintain a constant rate of fire so that we could coordinate and get people up online. And after those 10 rounds, that steel plate was doing this. It was moving back and forth like this, splitting in two, like, as if I was going cross-eyed. And I was like, man, this is insane. So I think moving forward, the 16-inch rifle is a great option for a DMR or SPR setup, something in this range. But I think what I would do is run it primarily without the suppressor and stow that suppressor in my gear, and then use that suppressor once I've gotten into a hide or some type of position where I'm doing a lot of scanning. And then if I have to get engaged, I can engage using that suppressor so that it masks my position a little bit better. And lastly was the use of optics, the importance of magnification for spotting. So the LPVO did pretty good. If there was movement, you can pick up on movement. The glass in this is really good. However, if you're going to be primarily spotting and scanning for potential movements or engagements, having something like a set of binos on you is paramount. It'll open up that field of view. It's a lot cleaner image. You can get a lot better magnification, and it's a more usable magnification. For instance, an 8x bino versus a 1:8 LPVO, that 8x bino is going to look infinitely better for that purpose than an LPVO. If you're not going to be carrying something like that, but you know you're going to be using that optic primarily for scanning and spotting, you're going to want something in a higher end range, maybe a 2.5 to 20, a 2 to 20, a 4 to 16, somewhere in that range. That's going to give you a lot more magnification so you can see better at distance and scan better, give you a wider field of view so you can pump up to say 12x on a 4 to 16, give yourself a much wider field of view, cleaner image, while not shrinking in that field of view and making that eye box tight. So, fantastic class. I was super cold. I fell into the ravine on one of the iterations, and then when they called freeze to try to identify somebody that may have been picked up on, I was stuck in that water for about 3 minutes, and it was an active stream. I was about 2 feet deep in it, and I could not move for about 3 minutes, and I was just, by the time I got out, my feet and my legs were completely numb. And that was the first time I slipped into that thing because I was trying to use the embankment, since it was pretty steep, to mask my movement. And but because of how bad the snow was and how wet the ground was, it was hard to maintain. So beyond after that point, I was just shivering my ass off the entire time. It made it extremely difficult to cinch in and make accurate shots once I started pushing out distance. And that was something that I had to work through and figure out how to overcome. But all in all, fantastic class. This is something I think somebody should definitely take, because if you're not gonna learn anything tactically, maybe you have that all down, you're gonna learn a lot of stuff about your gear and implementation of certain devices that are gonna either make or break you as an effective DMR shooter. So huge shout out to Jimmy and the cadre over at Whiskey Hotel. They did a phenomenal job with the class. Everybody there was super cool as far as the students go. Had a lot of cool conversations. Again, big shout out to Delta 34. Had a lot of great conversations with him. Really down to earth guy. And overall, it was a fantastic experience. And I would love to go back and do that again. So let me know what you think down below of my outline of this course, my experience, the gear, lessons learned, whole 9 yards. If you've taken any classes with Whiskey Hotel, let me know what your experience has been. I'd love to hear that. And if you haven't and this is intriguing to you, let me know that this is something that you would like to see. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.